The morning Noor Avellini laughed at his joke, Arman Vale did not know it would be the last ordinary moment of his life. He did not know that one careless sentence, spoken beside a sunlit tea stall while traffic hummed and sparrows fought over crumbs, would open a door he had spent years pretending did not exist. He only knew that Noor was standing there with flower dust still clinging to the sleeve of her pale blue kurta, her hair tied messily, her eyes tired but bright, and that when he teased her by saying, "At this rate, you'll never get married," she looked straight at him and replied softly, "What if it's you?" For one heartbeat, the whole street seemed to go silent. The kettle stopped screaming. The buses stopped groaning. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that arrives when life has almost broken us, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that may need them today. Arman had known Noor for almost 7 years, long enough to remember the girl she had been before grief turned her laughter into something careful. They had grown up in neighboring lanes of Mehrabad, a small, sun-drenched town where everyone knew who bought milk on credit, who failed an exam, who cried at weddings, and who came home late with secrets folded inside their pockets. Arman ran a small mobile repair shop beside the main road, a narrow place with glass counters, tangled chargers, and a fan that clicked like an old clock. Noor helped her widowed mother run a tiny bakery from their home, waking before dawn to knead dough, pack coconut biscuits, and deliver sweet bread to school canteens. Every morning, she passed Arman's shop with a basket on her arm, and every morning he found some excuse to step outside, ask about orders, make fun of her rushing, or offer tea she almost always refused. But behind their easy friendship was a heaviness neither of them named. Arman's father had died when he was 19, leaving behind debts, a broken scooter, and a mother whose silence frightened him more than tears. Arman had quit college, sold his books, and learned to fix phones because broken things at least gave him instructions. If a screen cracked, replace it. If a battery died, change it. If a button jammed, clean the dust beneath it. Human hearts were not so simple. Noor knew that too well. Her father had been a schoolteacher with gentle hands and big dreams for his daughter, but a sudden stroke took him one harsh summer afternoon. Since then, every proposal that came for Noor looked less like love and more like escape. Some families wanted dowry her mother could not afford. Some men wanted her to stop working. Some smiled at her beauty and frowned at her responsibilities. One by one, Noor turned them away, and the town began whispering that she was too proud, too stubborn, too old to wait. Arman heard those whispers more than once, and they angered him in a way he never admitted. He hated when women at the vegetable market lowered their voices and said Noor had rejected another family. He hated when his friends joked that she would end up married to her bakery. Yet he also hid behind jokes because jokes were safer than truth. That morning, when he saw Noor balancing 3 bread baskets while scolding a schoolboy for trying to steal a bun, something warm and familiar rose in him. She looked exhausted, brave, ridiculous, and beautiful all at once. So he said the sentence that changed everything. At this rate, you'll never get married. He expected her to roll her eyes, snap back, and hurry away. Instead, she stopped. Her fingers tightened on the basket handle. A faint smile trembled at the corner of her mouth, but her eyes were serious enough to wound him. "What if it's you?" she asked. Arman laughed because he was terrified. It came out awkward and too loud, like a chair scraping in a quiet room. He told her not to joke like that because people might hear, but Noor did not laugh with him. She only looked down at the bread in her basket as if she had already regretted opening her heart. Then she said she had deliveries and walked away into the brightness of the day, leaving Arman standing beside the tea stall with his pulse hammering and his hands suddenly useless. All day, he fixed phones badly. He misplaced screws, cracked a screen protector, and returned change twice to the same customer. Noor's words kept replaying in his mind, not like a question, but like a mirror. What if it's you? He had spent years worrying about money, duty, his mother's medicine, the shop rent, and the fear that he was not enough for anyone. He had never allowed himself to imagine Noor waiting for him, not because she needed saving, but because maybe, somehow, she had chosen him quietly while he was busy surviving. By afternoon, the town was glowing under hard sunlight. Arman closed the shop for lunch and walked past Noor's house, telling himself he only wanted to buy biscuits for his mother. The gate was half open. Inside, he saw Noor's mother, Syra, sitting on a wooden chair, pressing her hand to her chest while Noor fanned her with panic in her face. Arman dropped the biscuit excuse and ran in. He borrowed a neighbor's car, helped Syra into the back seat, and drove to the clinic so fast that Noor kept whispering prayers under her breath. The doctor said it was exhaustion and high blood pressure, not a heart attack, but Noor still cried outside the clinic, hiding her face behind the edge of her dupatta. Arman stood beside her in the yellow noon heat, wanting to comfort her, but afraid of what his tenderness would reveal. Finally, he said her mother would be fine, and Noor replied that everyone always said that before leaving her to handle the next storm alone. Those words stayed with him longer than her question. That evening, after taking Syra home, Arman returned to his shop but did not open it. He sat in the dimness, watching dust float through the sunlight, and understood something painful about himself. He had mistaken his fear for responsibility. He told himself Noor deserved someone richer, steadier, freer. He told himself marriage was impossible until the debts were cleared, until his mother was healthier, until his shop grew, until life became neat enough to invite love inside. But life had never become neat. It only kept moving, like the crowded road outside, carrying grief, bread, bills, laughter, and sudden confessions together. Noor was not asking for a perfect man. She was asking whether the man who had stood beside her for years would finally stop standing at a distance. Days passed, and the space between them changed. Noor still came by the shop, but her smiles were smaller. Arman tried to speak, failed, and filled the silence with clumsy kindness. He repaired Syra's old phone for free. He delivered medicine when the pharmacy boy forgot. He carried flour sacks from the market and pretended he had been going that way. Noor thanked him, but her eyes no longer lingered. Then, one Friday morning, a wealthy family from the next town arrived at Noor's house with sweets, polished shoes, and a proposal everyone called excellent. The man's name was Timur Safwan, a bank officer with a car, a new apartment, and parents who spoke as if they were doing Noor a favor by overlooking her age and family burdens. Arman watched from across the lane as their car parked outside her gate. For the first time in years, he felt the sharp edge of losing something he had never claimed. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Arman spent every minute pretending to repair a phone that was not broken. When the guests left, Noor came out to collect empty teacups from the courtyard. Her face was unreadable. That evening, Arman found her on the rooftop of her house, hanging washed bakery cloths in the golden light. He had gone there to return a container, but really, he had gone because silence was becoming unbearable. He asked if she liked the proposal, and she said liking had become a luxury. Timur's family could help her mother, settle debts, and give her a safer life. Arman wanted to say safety without love was another kind of hunger, but the word stuck. Noor looked at him then, with tired disappointment, and said some questions should only be asked once. He knew she meant the one she had asked at the tea stall. He knew he had answered with laughter when he should have answered with courage. That night, rain came suddenly, drumming on tin roofs and turning the lanes into silver streams. Arman's mother, Meher, found him sitting awake near the window. She had watched her son carry everyone's burdens like punishment for being alive after his father, and she was wiser than he knew. Without asking much, she told him love did not wait for men to become kings. It waited for them to become honest. Arman finally confessed that Noor had asked him something, and he had been too afraid to answer. Meher smiled sadly and said poverty was painful, but cowardice was lonelier. She reminded him that his father had married her with 2 shirts, a rented room, and a promise he kept until his last breath. Arman cried then, quietly, like a boy who had been strong for too long. By morning, something inside him had shifted. The next day was the town's spring fair, held in daylight across the school grounds, bright with kites, food stalls, children, and music from old speakers. Noor had set up a bakery table under a red canopy, selling honey cakes and cardamom biscuits. Arman arrived with his mother, carrying a small wrapped box and a heart full of thunder. But before he could speak to Noor, trouble arrived in the shape of Timur's mother. She complained loudly that Noor should not be standing in public selling bread if she intended to marry into a respectable family. People began to stare. Noor's face turned pale, but she did not lower her head. Saira, still weak, tried to stand, but Noor gently stopped her. Timur said nothing. He looked embarrassed, not by his mother's cruelty, but by Noor's work. Something in Arman broke open. He stepped forward, not with anger, but with a steadiness that surprised even him. In front of half the town, he said there was no shame in bread made before sunrise, no shame in hands that worked, no shame in a daughter who kept her mother alive with courage. The shame was in measuring a woman's worth by how quietly she could disappear after marriage. The fair grew silent. Noor stared at him, her eyes shining. Timur's family left in offended dignity, but the damage they intended did not land on Noor. It landed on the old beliefs around her and cracked them for everyone to see. After the crowd drifted away, Arman walked to Noor's table. His hands trembled as he placed the small wrapped box beside the honey cakes. Inside was not a ring. It was the repaired old wristwatch that had belonged to Noor's father, the one she had once said stopped on the day he died. Arman had spent nights finding parts for it from 3 different shops. Now its hands moved again. Noor touched it as if it were a living memory. Arman told her he had laughed that morning because he was afraid, not because she was impossible to love. He told her he had nothing grand to offer, only a small shop, an aging mother, debts he was slowly paying, and a heart that had already chosen her long before he had the courage to say it. Noor did not answer at once. She looked at the watch, then at her mother, then at the fair glowing under the afternoon sun. Finally, with tears slipping down her cheeks, she said she had never needed grand things. She had only needed someone who would not make her feel alone. Their wedding did not happen in a palace, and no one confused it for a fairy tale. It happened 6 months later in the courtyard between their homes, under strings of white lights and marigold garlands tied by neighborhood children. The day was bright, warm, and full of ordinary miracles. Saira cried while placing Noor's hand in Arman's. Meher blessed them with palms that shook from happiness. The bakery women brought trays of sweets. Arman's friends decorated his old scooter with ribbons. There was no expensive stage, no gold-heavy display, no prideful competition. But there was laughter that healed old rooms, and there was Noor, standing beside Arman with her father's watch ticking on her wrist, proving that time had not ended with loss. It had only been waiting to begin again. Years later, people in Mehrabad still spoke of that day at the tea stall. They spoke of the joke, the question, the silence, and the young man who almost lost love because he thought he was not enough. Arman and Noor opened a small bakery and repair shop side by side, calling it Second Morning. People came for warm bread, fixed phones, and sometimes for advice they pretended not to need. Noor would smile whenever nervous young men asked how to know if they were ready for marriage, and Arman would laugh gently before saying that no one is ever fully ready for love. You only become ready by choosing not to run from it. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who still believes love can arrive after hardship, comment your feelings below, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries for more emotional stories. Special request: comment second chance if you believe the right person can turn an ordinary day into the beginning of a beautiful life. And whenever Noor heard Arman joking with customers outside their shop, she would glance at the ticking watch on her wrist and remember the morning he said she would never get married. She no longer felt hurt by it. Some jokes, she had learned, are only frightened truths wearing a foolish smile. Some answers take time. And some love stories begin not with a proposal, but with one brave question whispered in daylight: what if it's you?